Why can't Rue Bennett be happy? Think with me, she is intelligent, has a family that cares, has jewels. Theoretically, she has everything to get out of the hole. But instead of climbing the ladder, she chooses to jump back into the pit. In this video, we are not only going to talk about addiction, we will take the risk of entering Rue's mental laboratory to discover the secret formula of why someone chooses chaos. What is she gaining by sabotaging herself? I guarantee you the answer is not what you think. There is a secret in her personality that goes unnoticed, a cheat code that, once you understand it, will change 100% the way you see Rue and maybe even the most lost people you know. Get ready to understand what it really means to be at the bottom of the pit but refuse to climb up. Hit play and come unravel this enigma that is Rue Bennett. If you are a fan of cinema, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any video. From what place in the world are you watching this video right now? Leave your answer in the comments. Rue is introduced as that girl who carries an invisible weight on her shoulders, even when she tries to smile. From the very first moment, you can feel that she is not just an ordinary teenager, but someone who has already seen and felt more than she should. She is both narrator and protagonist, which makes her almost like a distorted mirror of reality itself. It is as if the audience were invited to enter her secret diary, full of pain, guilt, and small confessions. And between us, who has never kept this kind of secret inside their chest, what is curious is that Rue is not only the main character, she is the filter through which we see Euphoria. And this filter is never completely clean. It always comes blurred by anxiety, drugs, fragmented memories, and heavy silences. This makes us think about how each of us also sees the world through personal filters shaped by experiences. Rue reminds us that no one sees reality in a neutral way. The way she tells the story is already a reflection of what she carries inside. The most interesting thing is noticing how Rue manages to be contradictory. She is sweet and vulnerable, but also destructive and unpredictable. This contrast is what holds us, in a way. She represents that part of us that wants to feel loved and protected, but at the same time makes choices that push people away. Who has never sabotaged their own life even knowing it was harmful? Rue is the personification of this human self-sabotage. She also has something magnetic, even lost. She awakens empathy. The audience looks at Rue and does not see only a troubled teenager, but someone who could be the school friend, the neighbor, or even our younger version of ourselves. This creates immediate identification because we all carry invisible scars. It is almost impossible not to recognize ourselves in some piece of her. Another strong thing is the feeling of emptiness Rue conveys. She comes back from rehab, but it seems like she never really left the hole she was in. This shows that the fight against your own mind has no clear finish line. Maybe this is one of the points that touches the audience the most. The idea that restarting is possible, but never easy. With each relapse, Rue reminds us that growth is not a straight line, but a road full of curves. And we cannot forget that Rue is also a raw portrait of today's youth. Anxiety, lack of belonging, social pressure, and the weight of expectations are trademarks of her generation and of ours too. The difference is that the series exposes everything without makeup, showing the dark corners many prefer to ignore. Rue is the voice that loudly says what many try to hide in silence. If we look closely, Rue is almost a walking metaphor. She lives between the desire to find herself and the fear of losing herself even more. This contradiction is what sustains her narrative. It is as if each episode were a reminder that identity is something fragile, constantly under construction and deconstruction. Rue forces us to face the question, who are we when we are shattered? And of course, behind this chaotic facade, there is always an origin story. Rue was not born broken, but was shaped by experiences, absences, and traumas. She is the result of wounds that never healed, and that is what we are going to explore in the next topics. Because understanding who Rue really is means diving deep into her internal conflicts. Rue lives with suffocating anxiety, that feeling that the ground can disappear at any moment. It is as if she were always waiting for the next fall, even when nothing wrong has happened yet. This constant tension shapes the way she sees the world, always on alert, always tired. It is like trying to breathe with a weight on her chest. Anxiety is invisible but consumes like fire. Her mind does not stop. Rue gets lost in racing thoughts, creating scenarios that almost never happen but that leave her exhausted as if they were real. It is like living in a suspense movie without intermission, where the heart beats hard for no apparent reason. This explains many of her impulses because when the head does not give a break, the body seeks immediate relief. And this relief for her almost always has the name of addiction. Anxiety also interferes with Rue's relationships. She approaches people with fear, as if any gesture could be misinterpreted. Nervousness makes her distrust affection, as if it were never enough. How many times have we doubted someone's care because of our own fears? Rue personifies this dilemma, making tangible what many feel in silence. And deep down, her anxiety is like a distorted lens. Everything seems bigger, more urgent, more threatening. And when you spend your life looking through this lens, it is easy to believe the whole world is too dangerous. That is where Rue gets lost, between what is real and what is projection. But this same distortion also opens the path to understanding the next trauma that shapes her depression. Depression Rue's. Depression is not just sadness. It is a kind of emptiness that swallows even the good moments. She can be surrounded by friends, family, even love, but still feels that internal hole. It is as if everything lost its color, as if life were seen in black and white. This feeling shapes her choices, because when nothing seems to make sense, any path can serve as an escape. This state leads her to seek relief in dangerous places. Drugs come in as anesthesia, a quick way to silence the pain she cannot explain. But ironically, the cure becomes poison, reinforcing the cycle. And this is a cruel point. When the mind is tired, the brain seeks shortcuts, and Rue clings to them even knowing the price. It is the logic of despair disguised as a solution. Depression also sabotages her self-esteem. Rue does not believe she deserves happiness, and this shows in her words, in her gestures, even in the way she looks at herself. This negative self-image is like a broken mirror. The more she tries to see herself, the more fragmented she feels. That is why so many times she abandons attempts to improve halfway. The shadow speaks louder than hope, and perhaps the most painful aspect of Rue's depression is the way it steals her identity. Who is she without this emptiness? Who could she be if the pain were not always there? These questions follow her in silence, guiding her choices and feeding even deeper conflicts. And it is in this scenario that another weight that corrodes her is born: guilt. Rue's addiction is more than chemical dependence. It is the desperate attempt to silence a pain that never shuts up. Each dose works as a momentary pause in the war she fights inside her own mind. But soon after comes the fall, and with it, even more pain, even more guilt. It is a cruel cycle in which the temporary solution becomes the biggest of problems. Addiction shapes not only her choices, but also her identity. Rue even wonders who she would be without drugs, as if she could no longer imagine herself free from them. This fusion between the self and the addiction is what makes recovery so difficult. It is not just about quitting a substance, it is about rebuilding who she is from scratch. And this process, by itself, is already too frightening. It also messes up all of Rue's relationships. Trust, which is the basis of any bond, is corroded with each relapse. The mother, the sister, the friends, everyone stays on alert, waiting for the next stumble. And this creates constant tension because addiction never affects only the user but the entire circle around them. Rue carries not only the weight of her own struggle but also the impact of hurting those she loves. Deep down, addiction is Rue's armor and prison. It protects her from immediate emptiness but imprisons her in invisible chains. This duality shows how people can be hostages of something that at the same time seems to save them and destroy them. And it is precisely in this prison that another trauma arises, the frustration of being misunderstood even when she is screaming inside. Rue carries guilt as if it were a backpack full of stones, always present, always heavy. She blames herself for her father's death, even knowing she had no control over it. She blames herself for relapses, for each broken promise, for each tear from her mother and sister. It is as if she were always owing something to the world, as if she lived apologizing for existing. This guilt shapes her choices in a cruel way. Many times, Rue sabotages her own attempts to improve because she believes she does not deserve to win. It is a dangerous thought: if I do not deserve, why try? This explains part of the destructive cycle she enters, where each mistake generates more guilt and each guilt pulls a new mistake. It is an emotional loop almost impossible to break alone. And guilt does not stay only inside her, it also affects relationships. Rue feels she disappoints those she loves, and this makes her distance herself from people even when she most needs them. It is as if she thought better hurt them from afar than up close. But in practice, this distancing creates even more pain and loneliness. Guilt, in this case, becomes a wall that separates Rue from the affection that could save her. Deep down, guilt is a wound that never heals. It is the constant reminder of the past and at the same time an obstacle to the future. Rue lives trapped in this paradox, trying to redeem herself from mistakes that are not always hers, and this emotional burden paves the way for another trauma that silently accompanies her, the fear of rejection. Fear of rejection, Rue wants to be loved, but at the same time deeply fears that love will come loaded with abandonment. This fear of rejection makes her enter relationships with a mix of intensity and distrust. She gives herself quickly, but at the slightest sign of distance, she already believes she will be left behind. It is as if she were always waiting for confirmation that she is not enough. This trauma is evident in her relationship with Jules. Rue sees in her a safe haven but also projects fears and insecurities. Each absence, each mood change becomes a reason to believe she will be rejected. And this weight ends up suffocating the relationship because no one can sustain a love that carries the responsibility of healing such deep wounds. Fear, in this case, speaks louder than affection. What is curious is that this fear of rejection is not limited to romantic love. Rue also fears disappointing her family, her friends, even strangers she barely knows. It is as if the gaze of others were always a threat, a judgment. This explains her defensive way, the silences, the way she sometimes reacts with anger when in fact she is begging not to be abandoned. Deep down, Rue fights against the feeling of not deserving belonging. This constant fear shapes her choices and traps her in cycles of distancing and approximation. She wants to be close but fears being discarded. This emotional contradiction is one of the greatest conflicts of her life and connects directly to the next trauma, addiction, which arises as an escape from this pain. Frustration at being misunderstood, Rue carries a deep frustration from feeling that no one really understands what she goes through. Her mother worries, her sister cries, her friends give advice, but nothing seems to touch the real dimension of her pain. It is as if she were speaking another language, asking for help in a code no one can decipher. This sense of isolation is suffocating, like screaming in an empty room. This frustration grows every time someone reduces her struggle to ready-made phrases like it is just about willpower. For Rue, this is not only irritating, it is cruel, because deep down she knows she would like to get out of this hole, but she cannot. This disconnection between what she feels and what others see creates an emotional abyss, reinforcing even more the cycle of loneliness. And it is not only at home that she feels misunderstood. At school, in the social group, in the medical environment, there is always a sense of judgment. Rue notices that people see the addiction before they see the person, and this reduces her to a stigma. This distorted social gaze weighs more than any relapse. After all, how can she find strength if the whole environment already expects her to fail? Deep down, this frustration of not being understood feeds the feeling of abandonment. Rue begins to believe that no one can really reach her, and this pushes her back to addictions and silences. This cycle reinforces another equally painful trauma, the constant self-criticism that turns her mind into an endless courtroom. Self-criticism, Rue lives at war with herself, and her mind functions like a court that never rests. Every mistake, every relapse, becomes evidence against her, as if she were always in the defendant's seat. This self-criticism not only erodes her self-esteem, but also blocks any attempt to start over. After all, how can you move forward when your own inner voice is the cruelest of all? The hardest part is that this self-criticism is born from unrealistic expectations. Rue demands perfection from herself in areas where perfection should not even exist, stopping using drugs overnight, fixing relationships instantly, being the ideal daughter. When she fails, she condemns herself without mercy. And this cycle of pressure and frustration only increases the feeling that she will never be enough. This harshness toward herself also affects her bonds. Rue often distances herself before giving others the chance to judge her because she has already made that judgment in her mind. It is as if she thinks, if I already know, I will disappoint. It is better not to try. This defense mechanism, however, isolates her even more, turning self-criticism into a prison. And it is at this point that a dilemma arises. If her mind is the enemy, how can she trust her own choices? This doubt opens space for the next trauma, perhaps the most devastating of all, the conflict between hope and despair, which defines every step of her journey. All of Rue's traumas and internal conflicts are directly reflected in the choices she makes daily. Every decision, from what to wear to whom to connect with, carries echoes of the past and unhealed wounds. It is as if each step were an attempt to balance pain and the desire to belong. We notice that her actions are not random, but deeply influenced by everything she has carried since early on. It is a map of emotional survival in motion. Rue's vulnerability, for example, makes her someone who loves intensely but is afraid to fully give herself. This mix creates complex relationships full of comings and goings, closeness and distance. She seeks connection, but the fear of rejection keeps her on constant alert. This pattern reveals how traumas shape affective behaviors and how the mind itself creates invisible barriers to protect from what has already hurt. Addiction also shapes the way she sees the world. Rue becomes someone seeking immediate gratification, quick solutions for temporary relief. This manifests in impulses that do not always make sense to outsiders. It is a dance between the instinct to survive and the desire to escape pain. And this dynamic makes us reflect on how often our own choices are guided by unresolved wounds. Constant self-criticism makes her introspective and sensitive, but also distrustful. Rue observes herself with a harsh lens, always evaluating if she is doing things right or if she failed. This habit influences her relationship with others, making her cautious and sometimes distant. But it also awakens empathy in the audience, who recognizes universal human traits in these flaws. Rue is almost like an emotional mirror. Another effect of these factors is emotional instability. Rue oscillates between intense joy, despair, and moments of near apathy. This roller coaster affects how she reacts to situations, people, and daily challenges. Her unpredictability is not just drama, it is a logical consequence of everything she has lived through, and it reminds us that human choices are rarely linear or simple. Guilt and anxiety make her extremely aware of the impact of her actions. Rue constantly asks herself, how will this affect me? How will it affect others? This reflection, although painful, also develops deep sensitivity. She learns to read signals, to perceive intentions and emotions of others, becoming intuitive even if confused inside. It is the duality of someone shaped by pain but also by sharp perception of the world. Experiences of loss and abandonment teach her to value genuine connections but always with one foot back. Rue approaches people who trust her but keeps invisible walls, protecting herself from what has already hurt her. This protection shapes choices in friendships, love, and even the opportunities she accepts. It is a delicate dance between trust and self-preservation that defines her character. And finally, all of these factors together make Rue incredibly complex, sensitive, intense, unpredictable, but also resilient. Every choice, every impulse, and every hesitation reflect a mind in constant reconstruction. This complexity not only defines her personality, but also creates a narrative that captivates us and makes us reflect on our own wounds. Rue teaches us that vulnerability is not weakness, but a form of silent courage. Showing our wounds does not mean we are defeated, it means we are still trying. She reminds us that everyone carries invisible battles and that empathy is more necessary than judgment. It is an invitation to look within ourselves and at others without rush or criticism. And that already completely changes the way we connect. She also shows us that life is rarely linear. Relapses, mistakes, and stumbles are part of the growth process. Rue makes us reflect on how society expects perfection, but what really matters is to keep trying even when everything seems to collapse. Every failure is a learning opportunity, even if it hurts. And she teaches us to recognize this in ourselves. Another point is the importance of recognizing our own limits. Rue reminds us that no one needs to carry everything alone and that asking for help is not weakness. Sometimes survival requires admitting vulnerability and accepting support. It is a valuable lesson because many of us were taught to endure without ever showing fragility. Rue gives us permission to be human with all flaws and imperfections. Ju teaches about the complexity of human relationships. Friendships, love, and family ties are always complicated, and that is normal. She shows that every connection comes with challenges, and that there is no formula to always get it right. Understanding this helps us have patience with others and ourselves. Deep down, the series invites us to value these connections even when they seem difficult or confusing. She also forces us to confront our own addictions and escape mechanisms, whether drugs, social media, or self-destructive habits. Rue shows that escaping pain is natural, but facing reality is necessary to grow. It is a reminder that no one changes overnight, but every effort, no matter how small, has value. Small steps can generate great transformations. In addition, Rue teaches us about emotional resilience. Despite constant falls, she continues trying to find meaning and purpose. Her persistence inspires us to continue, even when it seems impossible. She is an example that strength is not the absence of pain, but the ability to rise after every fall. And this is something we can all apply in our daily lives. She also reminds us that identity is fluid and under construction. Rue is still discovering herself, learning about herself and the world. This teaches us that we do not need to have all the answers or fit into rigid patterns. The process of self-knowledge is continuous, and sometimes challenging, but deeply liberating. Rue shows us that being lost is part of the path to finding oneself. And finally, Rue reminds us that life is a mixture of light and shadow. Accepting our imperfections, understanding our pain, and celebrating small advances makes us more human and connected. She teaches that learning from mistakes and allowing ourselves to feel is more important than trying to protect ourselves from everything. And it is in this balance between vulnerability and strength that we find meaning, preparing the ground to reflect on how we can deal with our own stories. So, what did you think about diving into Rue's mind? Can you relate to any of her conflicts, or did you notice something you had never thought of before? Tell me in the comments which character you want me to analyze in the next video. I want to see your choices. And of course, if you want to keep exploring these stories and understand the psychology behind each character, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. That way, you will not miss any content and continue learning with us about the most complex characters on screen.